Call the meeting to order. President DeCipio is detained at another meeting. I call for a nomination of President Pro Tem.
I'll make a motion to appoint Trustee Scott Messick in his absence until he gets here.
Second?
Trustee Messick? Oh, sorry. Trustee Rocco? Yes. Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Casera? Absent. Trustee Zora? Yes. Trustee Wagner?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I'm ready.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Linda, will you call the roll?
President Pro Tem Messick?
Here.
Trustee Rocco? Here. Trustee Sheehan?
Here.
Trustee Casera is absent. Trustee Zora? Here. Trustee Wagner?
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda was the swearing in of paid-on-call Fire Lieutenant Christopher Wagner. We're going to move that down a little bit. The president really wants to be here. We can move up. Public participation and consent agenda, and he'll be here for that. So for next, public participation. Non-agenda. Seeing none.
The items on this evening's consent agenda are as follows. A, approval of minutes, village board meeting, September 22nd, 2015. Work session meeting, October 13th, 2015. Work session, executive session, October 15th, 2015. The action, quick money, health inspection. Motion approving the resolution authorizing execution of the health inspection services agreement with the county of Rose. And authorizing village president to execute the necessary contract documents. C, action, occupational medical evaluation. Motion to approve the payment of $10,501 to Health Endeavors SC of Lombard, Illinois for this year's annual occupational medical evaluation. D, motion to authorize the president and chairperson of the finance committee to sign the register of bills and authorize the treasurer and village clerk to sign checks in payment of operating bills and salaries as itemized in the check register. E, action, motion to authorize the village treasurer and village clerk to sign checks in the payment of payroll and other bills that become due between this date and November 24th, 2015, with subsequent approval, payroll register and voucher register by the Board of Trustees at its regular meeting to be held on November 24th, 2015.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion and seconded. Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Zora?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Emily, we do not, do you want to move ahead with the regular scheduled agenda? Or I can start with the committee.
Why don't we start with the committees?
All right. Administration Committee, Chairman, or Trustee Lautner, I'm sorry, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I have a few items to report on this evening from the administration area. First of all is regarding Halloween that's upcoming at the end of the week. The village would like to remind residents that Halloween in LaGrange Park is celebrated on this Saturday, October 31st, with trick-or-treat hours from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. The village encourages residents to exercise extra caution on Halloween evening while having fun. Young children should be accompanied by an adult or an older responsible child. All children should walk from house to house and use the sidewalk when available. Children should be cautioned against running out between parked cars or across lawns where ornaments or furniture present dangers. Drivers are reminded to use extra caution that evening when traveling throughout the neighborhoods. The second area is regarding also Halloween, but the haunted trolley trick or treat is available on Friday, October 30th. The LaGrange Park Chamber of Commerce will be sponsoring its annual haunted trolley trick or treat event. This event will be held from 4 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. on that evening. Parents and children are invited to hop on a trolley at one of several locations, including the LaGrange Park Community Park District facility, the Village Market, and locations along 31st Street. The trolleys will travel along a designated route, dropping patrons at specified stops so that children can trick or treat amongst the various businesses. And the third item is regarding an upcoming town hall meeting that we would like to extend an invitation to the entire village regarding the upcoming 2016 referenda. The village will host a town hall meeting on Thursday, November 12th to provide information and answer questions regarding the March 15, 2016 bond referenda. The referenda includes a bond referendum to finance a $10 million road improvement project and also $1.2 million to finance a new ladder truck and ambulance for our fire department. The village is committed to providing high-quality services in a fiscally responsible manner, and we encourage our residents to stay informed about these important community issues so that they can act accordingly in the best interests of our village. Please join us on November 12th at 7 p.m. to learn more. The meeting will be held in the boardroom of Village Hall here at 447 North Catherine in LaGrange Park, 60526, and there's information that's located about the referendum on our village website at www.lagrangepark.org. And I encourage everyone to please be as informed about these two important referendum for the village as much as possible. And that concludes my report for this evening from the administration area, Mr. President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Trustee Lautner. I'm going to jump ahead one because I think the president is almost here, and go to Engineering and Capital Projects Committee with Trustee Rocco filling in for Trustee Casera.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. Just one moment, I'll jump ahead. Here we go. The summary report for September of 2015 for Engineering and Capital Projects. Thank you, Kathy. Only punch list items remain to be completed on the Illinois Department of Transportation contract for Kenman Avenue resurfacing project from 31st Street to 26th Street. Maintenance responsibility for the traffic signal installation at 31st Street will be returned to IDOT in October. The repaving of Cleveland Avenue from 30th Street to 26th Street by GA Paving was completed in June. The contractor has been directed to move forward with completing all landscape restoration by the end of October. The resurfacing of Pine Tree Lane and the portion of Finsbury Lane that was not part of the McNaughton development is approximately 60% complete. The contractor, GA Paving, expects that all work on the project be completed by the end of October. And that concludes my report, and there are no action items. Thank you, Mr. President. Pro Tem, so we're back here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Trustee Messick. Trustee Rocco, are you done?
Thank you, Mr. President. I am done.
Thank you. So we're going to go back to the swearing in. Give me 1 second. Okay, over the past several months, the fire department conducted a testing and evaluation process for paid-on-call fire lieutenant candidates. The testing and evaluation process consisted of an assessment center, which included a written test, a structured oral interview, and tactical simulation exercises. The process also included other evaluation components, such as an assessment of a candidate's training and callback attendance, an assessment of his traits applicable to the position of lieutenant. Following the testing and evaluation process, firefighter paramedic Christopher Baller was ranked highest out of the 7 candidates. Chris began his employment at the LaGrange Park Fire Department in January of 2005 as a contract paramedic firefighter with PSSI Incorporated. He subsequently purchased a home here and moved into the village and became a regular paid-on-call firefighter paramedic in August of 2008. He recently was married to his wife Megan, who is a nurse and to whom he met at the hospital while on duty. Okay. There is currently a vacancy in the rank of paid-on-call fire lieutenant caused by a recent resignation. As such, Christopher Waller is being promoted to fill that rank. Chief, would you do the honors, please?
You want to come up?
He's good at bags, too. Did you know that?
Before Chris is sworn in, I'd just like to make a few comments. As you heard, we recently went through a testing and evaluation process. Even though we're a paid-on-call fire department, we feel we put everybody through a fairly strenuous process and demanding process. There were multiple parts of it. One was an assessment day where they had to run a tactical exercise, take a written test, do an oral interview, and then there were other components along the way. As you heard, Chris happened to score number 1 out of the group of applicants that took the test. Everybody did very well. Chris ended up at the top. We did have a recent resignation from one of our lieutenants due to an injury, and it came just in time for our assessment center. It worked out very well, and within weeks, we are here today honoring Chris. In looking at his traits and his background and his commitment he has had so far in our organization, he truly deserves the promotion that we're going to see here tonight. Chris has been very involved. As you heard, he bought a house in the community after he was a contract paramedic here. He didn't have to live in the community. He bought a house, he moved into the community, and he joined our fire department, as we call a regular paid-on-call member. As you know, being a paid-on-call member, we've talked about it before, takes a lot of work, especially when you may not have your full-time career in the fire service. There is a great deal of dedication and involvement beyond your regular daily life expectations or activities. Chris is ready to take another step in that. A couple things we look at, and our firefighters see this all the time through through websites, through emails, through things that are distributed. There's a million different pages of things about leaders, and especially in the fire service. Just a couple of them real quick. Leaders help others to exceed. They encourage development of others, not fear it. They focus on people, not material resources. And it can go on and on. We talk about accountability, respect, courage, and page after page here are articles I found on leadership over the years, and Chris is expected to live up to them, and we believe he will. Again, we're a small village with a fairly small paid-on-call fire department. For most people, it's their second job, so it takes a lot to live up to that. We still are expected and demand our officers to be as good as any full-time firefighters, to be as dedicated, to be knowledgeable, as an officer, to be leaders of any other fire service organization, to be at the same level. So Chris has a lot to live up to, but we believe he will. And if we could do the formal swearing in.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Christopher Bodler,
I, Christopher Baldwin,
hereby solemnly swear
hereby solemnly swear
that I will uphold and defend
that I will uphold and defend
the Constitution of the United States of America
the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and I will faithfully carry out all duties
and I will faithfully carry out all duties
imposed upon and entrusted in me
imposed upon and entrusted in me
as a paid-on-call fire lieutenant
as a paid-on-call fire department lieutenant
for the village of LaGrange Park.
for the village of the Grange.
Also, as most of you know, whether you're a new firefighter or a promoted firefighter, we like to have a significant other pin his new badge on him. And obviously, he's had a badge for years, but he will now get a lieutenant's badge with one bugle signifying he's a lieutenant in our organization. So, Chris, would you like to call somebody up?
My newly wife, Megan Yurnich.
And actually, I think on behalf of Chris and the fire department, we're very grateful for those who were able to come out tonight. But before she finishes, can you just talk about your family that's out here tonight?
My father, Alan Bother, my brother Mark Bother came out to support me, as they've supported me all throughout. And also the members of the Grange Park Fire Department. What a great turnout, and I'm very happy that you all are here to experience this with me. So thank you very much, and also thank you very much, Chief Bengals.
Once again, he has a lot to live up to. We hope to have him here as a leader for years to come, and we congratulate him and his wife again.
Very cool.
Lieutenant, this is quite a privilege for us to have you move up the ranks here. You have always been respectful. You've always been part of the group. You've always been professional in everything that you do. It's a pleasure working with you, as I attest to all my other board members here. And your love among your community in the LaGrange Park Fire Department is certainly evident tonight. What a great night, and we thank you for taking the position. Let's give him another round.
And if you don't mind, Mr. President, we have cake for him in the firehouse, so we're going to let everybody leave unless they're really excited to hear the rest of the
But
meeting.
one condition. One condition. We're still bags partners, right? Okay. Then you can go.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thank you. He just called me 10 minutes.
Yeah, so now we're on the village manager's report, and then we go right to building and zoning.
Okay. And then we have to continue then from there.
Correct.
Thank you.
Oops.
Okay, moving on. Julia, they've been through most of the reports up till now, and yours, they waited till obviously you came back. So if you would like to do your report at this point?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. I have two items to report, the first of which is regarding the village audit. At your place settings this evening, there should be a copy of the final audit report along with a cover memo. There will be a very brief presentation on the audit by Hank Demlau at the November work session. So we're not done with the audit yet, so we look forward to that overview. The second item I have to report is regarding an update to the TIF feasibility study that we're currently working on. We released an RFP. We received 5 proposals. We've narrowed those down to interview the top 3 firms, and that interview with the Commercial Revitalization Committee will take place on November 4th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So there will be 3 firms interviewed starting at 6 p.m., and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, moving on to Building and Zoning Committee, Trustee Zora.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to start with my building department activities. 108 building department
different mic.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Estimated construction costs through for the month are up by 51% of what they were compared to September of last year. Permit fees collected are up about 54%. 229 inspections were conducted this past September, with 23 of those not approved. As of the end of September, 89 more inspections have been conducted year to date as compared to the same time last year. Plans were also submitted and approved for repairs to the structure that failed at Ace Hardware. As such, a permit was issued to begin such repairs. During the month, another reimbursement was processed for a resident participating in our sewer backup prevention program. We have now issued 4 reimbursements for a total of $8,675. We're continued throughout the month on the site for the Nazareth Addition project. Significant work began in relation to the building's foundation. And that concludes my report. So the next item that's up for action and a motion, on August 18th, 2015, the Zoning Board of Appeals conducted a public hearing to consider zoning application number 2015-05 filed by Mr. and Mrs. Kruski for 1618 Finsbury Lane for a variation from section 12(4)C of the zoning code, which prohibits the location of generators in front, interior side, or corner side yards and setbacks. The variation was requested to allow an existing generator to remain in an interior side yard. The generator was installed without permit, and the property owners received 2 violation notices from the village and failed to bring the property into compliance with the village code. The ZBA accepted testimony and evidence into record. Upon conclusion of testimony, the ZBA determined that the application did not meet the standards for a variation as outlined in section 4.3F of the zoning code. The ZBA recommended the village board deny the requested variation. This item, I would like to make a motion to move forward with this item to deny zoning application number 2015-05 requesting a variation from section 12(4)C of the zoning code for 1618 Finsbury Lane.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Trustee Zora?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not view this as meeting our hardship requirements. I don't want to set a precedence for asking for forgiveness instead of following the village code. I also want to think of future residents and the people that are going to be living next to this resident. I understand the current neighbor accepts this, but we don't know what future residents are going to say. And also, I know one of the comments in the testimony involved that there was no other place that this could be located, and this was due to the sub pump requirements because of flooding. And there are other options, in my opinion, that they could use a smaller generator that could be located in a different location, or they could use battery backups for their sub pumps. They're not required to fully have a full generator that's going to supply the entire house. They could use a smaller generator that could back up portions of the house and the sub pumps and not the entire house. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Zora. Any other comments from board members? Trustee Rocco?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just like to point out that the purpose of the generator ordinance is to mitigate the potential noise and aesthetic impacts on its neighbors. Mr. Krowski, I'm not sure if it's pronounced Krowski or Kruski. Is it Krowski? Mr. Krowski, he's had to redo his floors numerous times due to flooding. So he has a recurring flooding problem with his basement, and he has the property lines that he has to deal with on the property that he has in order to rectify what he can do or mitigate the flooding, to reduce the flooding in his basement. He approached a manufacturer and distributor for generators, and the size that he received or ordered was the size that was recommended to him by the dealer, by the installer. He put it in a location. Prior to putting it into location, he consulted his 2 neighbors, the neighbors that would be most affected by the generator. After a careful consultation between his neighbors and himself, and looking at the property that he is stuck with, his property, in terms of where to put the generator, they came to the conclusion that the best spot for the generator was where the spot is. It's a spot that's not being used. It has no other purpose. It's not an area that would be useful for It's along the side of the garage. So he's shown the undue hardship that he has flooding, and he's dealt with the property that he has. He has shown that it's granted it doesn't alter the essential character of the neighbor locality. The neighbors, in fact, agree with where he put it. Relocating the generator to where we think the generator should be located is going to cause greater disturbance among his neighbors and himself. We're putting it closer to the house's bedrooms, to the living areas of the 3 houses. Where the generator is located currently now, there is no bedroom or living area. It's in the front portion of the driveway, yet it's set far back enough. He's putting a fence up. That's how, this came to be developed, that he's putting a fence up that's going to cover the generator. So in terms of the aesthetics, there's not an aesthetic impairment. In fact, moving it to where we are suggesting, which is one was suggested was for him to pull out a tree and put it in that location where is causing greater undue hardship. The generator from also was stated in the testimony was the generator smaller than most other generators that are in the neighborhood. That is not a great size. We can decide what's a better generator or smaller, could have gone smaller or larger, but what we do know is that he took steps for a reasonable person would take. He consulted the dealer, the manufacturer. This is the generator he was recommended to use. He had recurring flooding problems. He had to redo his floors numerous times. So to say that he doesn't have undue hardship, he's got limited property. He's putting it in a location where if you drive by, makes the most sense and is the least, like I said, disturbs the neighbors it has the least effect on the neighbors, and in terms of the enjoyment of his property, it's the best place because there's really not much you can do with the property where it's currently located to enjoy it. You're asking for him to put it back in the backyard. He doesn't have a large backyard, and you're asking him to then make space and room for this when it's already clearly in the best space for the land that he has, for the problem that he's trying to resolve. The Zoning Board of Appeals, it was a close call. It was 2-2. There were not 6 members there that night. So it feasibly could have been a 4-2 in favor. 2 voted in favor, 2 voted against it. As President DeCipio said at the work session, that's a recommendation by the Zoning Board of Appeals. It is up to us as the board that we have the final say in this decision. I think we ought to look closely. Yes, there's a reason why we have an ordinance, and we want to follow the ordinance, and we don't want to upset precedents. But on the same token, there's a reason why we have variances in the ordinance. And this is a situation where the variance applies. I would like to hear from my fellow trustees, board members, to see if there's something that I'm missing, or if you have questions of me or question my judgment. I'd be happy to hear and engage in discussion on that before we decide on this issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Trustee Messick?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, Trustee Rocco, I never question your judgment. It may be different from mine, but your judgment is always solid. I will say on this case, I disagree with you. We have a zoning code for a reason, and there are criteria that need to be met in order to get a variance. So that's why we do have variances. I agree with Trustee Zora here. They don't meet the undue hardship. The hardship is not, in this case, would not be the flooding. The hardship is they can't put it where they want to. There are options, as Trustee Zora touched on, to put it where they want to that will take care of the hardship of the flooding. So that's the separate issue. Yes, these are, as discussed before, these current neighbors agree with where it's at. They say it's okay. We have to look out for the future. Like I said, I'm always looking 20 years ahead. The next group of residents may not like it there. I said, the noise also at the front of the building, if you're outside in front today, it's not always if it's just under a window. The fact that they didn't get a permit, were then challenged on it later and waited 2 more years to get a permit, and they only came in to ask for the variance because they wanted a permit for a fence. tells me, again, they didn't see it as a necessary hardship either. And as far as the zoning board being short, it could have feasibly been 2-4 against as well as 4-2. So I have to go on what the code stands. I don't see that it meets the requirements for a variance, and I would vote to deny it.
Thank you, Trustee Messick. Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Trustee Rocco certainly has raised some excellent points, and I think that we all want to focus on the right thing for the village, right thing for our residents, and trying to figure out how we can move forward here with the best solution for all parties involved. Initial conversations that we went through, I certainly do share the concerns about the precedents that this would establish. And it just, and I'm not, as a representative of the village, not particularly happy about how the penalties were assessed and basically ignored, and that things weren't done correctly from the get-go. But all that aside, I think that Trustee Rocco has made some good points about what is the best location, and I think there's some credence in the location as it relates to the front of the house, the driveway versus proximity to the bedrooms and things of that nature. So I guess a couple questions that I have is, in that if a variance was approved, what consideration could be represented for future neighbors? I understand that current neighbors have said that they're fine with it. The concern we have, of course, is neighbors down the road, and what if they're not fine with it? What accommodations perhaps could be made in that situation? So I guess where I am on this is that I could consider a variation under the premise that a fence is put in, that's an approved sound barrier type fence, similar to what we're looking at behind the village here. Also in consideration of paying all fines that have been assessed, that were appropriately assessed and should be brought up to payment. And if there's some way that an agreement or some sort of accommodation could be, an acceptance could be written, that in the event of a changed neighbor that has an issue with it, that there would be the direction that it would have to be moved, in giving the new neighbor the opportunity to be able to state that it is an issue with them and to accommodate future neighbors in that regard. So with those considerations, I think I could support a variance in this with those three aspects. I don't know what process we would have to go through to write something that in the future, in the event of a changed neighbor, that they would have, I'll say, the authorization to require the current location of the generator to be moved. And that's where I am at this point.
I think that might be a little bit hard to enforce, because what if the current residents who are getting the variation get the variation, but it's a conditional variation conditioned on their neighbors continuing to approve of the generator? Then what if the Krauskis sell their house, the new owner doesn't know anything about this conditional variation, and then there's a new neighbor next door, and the new neighbor says, I don't like it, and now we've got two sets of new owners, and the people who bought the house with a conditional variation coming to us and saying, now I have to spend $10,000 to move this generator. I just don't think that's workable. The other thing, that when we start tying variations to consent of immediate neighbors, the issue there is that's not really the criteria that's in the zoning code. We can't say to our community, as a rule, we have these regulations. There's setback regulations, there's location regulations. You can't put your air conditioning compressor here and here. You can't put your generator here and here. But if you get your two neighbors to agree to it, we'll get you a variation. As long as those two neighbors agree to it, it's going to be chaos, really. And I think it, over a long term, I think it denigrates the authenticity and the enforceability of our zoning code, because it becomes this thing about if your neighbors are okay with it and it makes sense, then we'll give you a variation. The variation should really only be if the board finds that the hardship has been proved and the other criteria for a variation, not just that the current neighbors are in agreement. Because in the past, whenever we've granted variations, we don't grant conditional variations. We grant variations that are across the board, and they continue for as long as that particular use is in place. So in this case, a variation would continue as long as that generator was there. So conditional variations, I think, are a little bit difficult for the village.
Thank you for the clarification and explanation on that. And I certainly see your point. But a variation is a means by which it seems like we attempt to handle a unique situation. And it does appear that this is unique in this regard. And I guess the hardship that I do see is the problem that's trying to be solved, and that's the flooding issue. Mm-hmm. And without necessary additional exorbitant expense for relocating that generator. So, and the other aspect, I guess, that I would raise a question about is there certainly are inspections that I think that we're accustomed to putting in place upon sale and change of ownership of property.
No, we don't have any inspections, not for single-family residences.
I thought if there were variants or if there were
No.
open building and zoning issues. So there's no process.
We're not a home rule village, and we don't have a transfer tax or an inspection, or we don't have anything that triggers the village knowing that a sale of property is taking place, as compared with other villages like Oak Park, Berwyn, Cicero, villages like that. If we had a transfer tax, then we could begin to attach conditions to you getting a transfer tax stamp. We could say, well, we're not going to issue the stamp unless we do a property inspection, which is what they do in Berwyn and Cicero and Oak Park. So, and Westchester, by the way, does a certificate of compliance. We don't have that. So we have no way of policing this down the road.
Thank you. Don't we have a process with the downspout removal process that's handled at a change of ownership? I thought there was some.
Historically, we never
Yeah.
have. That's why we've had the downspout disconnection
Right.
ordinance in place for about 20 years,
Right.
and largely non-compliant.
Yeah. So it turns out to be a non-compliant issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. No more questions.
Trustee Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. President. On this issue, I cite with Trustee Messick and Trustee Zora. I can feel for that, especially that area, there is constant water issues, flooding, including my dear friend in the audience who's right around the corner from this. But I cannot see setting a precedent, and I know that there's many other residents in this village that do experience flooding problem that remediate with a different way other than generator as options. But it is where it is right now, and I cannot support it, sir.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan. Comments? Trustee Rocco?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple things. I just want to point out that, in my opinion, flooding is not a separate issue. That is what caused him to have to go out and get the generator, is because he has recurring flooding. So that is a issue for him that he has to deal with in his home. And so he got a generator, and he put the generator in a place that makes the most sense for that property. I understand we're talking about future neighbors. I'm hard pressed to understand any future neighbor that would object to where he's putting it, as opposed to where we're telling him to put it. We're actually telling him to put it in a place that's going to be more of a noise nuisance to himself and to his neighbors than where it currently is. So that is an issue. In terms of whether the fact that the permits, him not seeing as, saying that he didn't see it as a necessary hardships because he didn't go forth ask for the permit. I think the record, as we talked about, and I won't go into detail, but at the workshop session, that there was plausible deniability on his part. When he received the notice of violation, he got the letters from his neighbors, sent the letters to his neighbors, to the village saying, hey, they're fine with it. Yes, he should have taken more, the formal steps, absolutely. And that's why we have penalties, and that's assessed, and that's where, then we handle it in that method. But he went to Poland for a couple weeks, or for a month, and so we're unclear about the follow-up after he sent in the letter saying that his neighbors didn't object to it. We know we sent a letter, but as far as, then from that, it dropped off the books. So, I just think that we, and in terms of, I appreciate absolutely with what Attorney Keating's saying in terms of, tying this into future neighbors or future sales. It's too ambiguous, it's too confusing and a mess. But in terms of other restrictions, I thought the suggestions of possibly a barrier fence and paying whatever fines are reasonable. We've put other restrictions and conditions on variances that have been granted in this village. So I would think that as long as the restriction is something that's tied into, like a barrier fence, that's something that, I think maybe is worth looking into. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Trustee Zora?
Thank you, Mr. President. I did want to, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. I did want to mention that I did drive by the property, and it's a lovely property, but you can very well see the generator from the street. And I do know that generators require a certain amount of clearance around them with fencing, and we are pretty close to the property line there, so I don't even know if that would be allowed by the manufacturer. In addition, I also wanted to mention that, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose of the variation process is to ask for a variation code before you have violated it. So I don't think that we can say that this is an actual variation because we're asking after the fact, which...
People have done retroactive variations.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Trustee Zora. Trustee Messick?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one other point here, too. In Mr. Krowski's own testimony, in the findings of fact, testified that he chose to install the generator in the interior side yard in order to minimize the length of the connection to the gas meter to maintain full use of the backyard for recreation, gardening, and entertainment. That doesn't constitute a hardship in my life. It's in the findings of fact right here. So the flooding can be, the hardship is would following the code create undue hardship. The flooding can be alleviated if he followed the code, so that hardship's taken care of if he follows the code.
But he has a right to his enjoyment of property. Excuse me, Mr. President, if I may. He has a right to his enjoyment of property, and if that affects where he puts the generator, affects his right to his enjoyment of the property as it is, then it does tie in as an undue hardship, because where he puts that generator in the backyard is going to affect the use of his land. And so for us to take that so lightly, like he could just move it and place it in his backyard, yet when there's a perfectly good spot for it where it currently is. And I understand that we're talking about the penalties versus the variance, but I really urge us to separate the issue of penalties versus the issue before us. And the issue before us today is, should a variance be granted? Has he met the criteria, the undue hardship, the unique circumstances of the property, and it will not alter the essential character of the locality? And he has met that criteria. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. Clarification on variance. Is a variance considered potentially a one-time exception, or is it considered global impact across the board?
Well, it's considered, each variation is considered on the merits of its own facts.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 people could ask for a generator variation, and only one might, in the opinion of the zoning board and the board of trustees, meet the criteria. However, when people on the board and on the zoning board of appeals talk about setting a precedent, the precedent that they're setting is really an informal precedent. It is a way of treating a set of facts. So that if a zoning board or a board of trustees were to view one set of facts a certain way and vote a certain way, and then 3, 6, 9 months later, have a similar set of facts and say, yeah, now I'm gonna say no, and the facts were substantially similar, then we might be accused of, playing favorites or whatever it is. That's the precedent setting. It's not a formal precedent setting idea, it's kind of informal. But the idea is that we apply the same criteria, and the criteria are set forth in the zoning code to the granting of every variation. And that we interpret the facts and apply the criteria to those facts.
Thank you.
Staff, did the petitioner come in and talk to you guys, or did he just send a letter? At the point when he was receiving notices that he was, he needed a permit to put the generator in,
With our building inspector multiple times.
and the building inspector stated that he needed a permit and it was out of place. So he knew this. See, I just have a tough time. Chief, did you want to say something?
I know there's some concern about the follow-up, and I'll take responsibility for that, but I don't think the circumstances would have changed. I think unless we pursued and wrote a ticket and enforcement and brought the property owner into court, if we took the same action 2 years ago, you would have probably seen this variation come forward 2 years ago. Whether that's the right course of action in the future, maybe not. Maybe we need to enforce the code and go to court. But the generator was already in place, and I think the same circumstances would have happened today. I don't want to sway anybody's opinion, but I'm kind of concerned that if the variation is approved, it could lead to other property owners moving forward and ask for forgiveness later, and then it would continuously put the village in a bind. Again, I don't, that's just my opinion. I can't say that would happen. Again, we may take other action in the future. We may pursue it with actual tickets, court appearance tickets, instead of allowing them to come forward with the variation, but that has the potential. At least that's my opinion.
Thank you, Chief. And my question was not in the staff or you in being responsible. It was the petitioner's response in taking ownership of the situation and coming forward and trying to resolve it, rather than sending a letter saying that the neighbors agreed it's okay to put it there.
No, and I understand, but I knew that was a question throughout this process also, so I thought now was the time to address it.
Okay. And I think the board has to be careful too, because, when the petitioner was notified, really nothing was done until the petitioner wanted to put a fence up, and then he felt the need to come forward and to rectify the problem from 2 years ago before he could get the fence. If we're going to make decisions and have variances, they have to be under the right circumstances. Is there other places he could have put it? I haven't seen the yard, but if we had told him from the get-go, if he had come forward and said, I need a permit to put my generator in, our staff would have gone out and shown him where the best place would be within the guidelines of our zoning code. And things may have been differently, but it seems like after the fact, he's trying to justify, or they're trying to justify why it needs to be there when, it's just all done backwards. I don't think having a motion, Trustee Lautner, and I'm not sure I followed it, but if we put a provision in there, which Ms. Keating says we can't do at this point, is to let residents decide whether it's okay or not. Would it be different if a resident moved and a new resident came in and said, I don't like it there? What would our decision be at that point? Would it be to move it then or not?
Only if there was the ability to provide a condition in advance and a contractual agreement now that should a future resident or neighbor deem it to be obtrusive, that it would need to be moved.
Yeah,
And if we can, and that would be the question, would we be able to set that in a legal contract prior to that?
And I wouldn't certainly not be in agreement with it, because now we're letting the resident decide to tell us, now it's time to move it because I moved in and I don't like it. We have to do what's right with the zoning code in the village at the get-go. And, you know, we don't like penalizing anybody. We don't like doing anything to make our residents unhappy, but we have zoning codes that we need to follow, and certainly there's room for variances. It's just a matter whether the board at this time feels that this is applicable and necessary and agreeable that a variance should be considered. Trustee Rocco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one follow-up in terms of the fence. He came forward not to get the variance. He came forward for the fence permit, and then it was brought to his attention, hey, you never got the variance for the generator. You need to get that first before we deal with this fence. So he didn't even, it's not like he was astute enough to know that he should come forward for the variance. That's how I understood it, is that he came forward for the fence and then was told, you need to file a variance. You need to go ahead with the variance.
That's true, but in the correspondence that the building inspector, Rob Beers, provided the applicant, in response to the letter he sent in saying my neighbors are okay with it, our building inspector provided him a letter stating, these are your options. You either need to remove it or you need to apply for a variance, and provided him the appropriate documentation. So 2 years ago.
That's the letter that we're talking about that was in January, that we're not sure if he received it when he was in Poland, right? That's the letter. Right, we mailed a letter, but not certified, right, but I mean, he was gone for 2 months. I'm just saying there's plausible deniability that that letter could have been lost in his shuffle of a month's worth of mail. It wasn't certified. It was a letter. That's the letter that we're referring to. The next time it came to his attention was when he filed for the permit for the fence, and we then brought it again to his attention saying, hey, you need to get a variance.
I think that's an assumption.
That's, I think.
Because he did have his daughter looking over the property while he was gone, so.
You're right. I'm assuming it's plausible deniability. You're absolutely right, Mr. President. I don't have that. That's plausible deniability.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Kathy, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, as a point of order, because the zoning code specifically, not our zoning code, the Illinois zoning code specifically permits or provides that when a zoning variation is not recommended by the Zoning Board of Appeals, it can only be approved by the Board of Trustees by the affirmative vote of 4 trustees. I think instead of wording the motion as a motion to deny the zoning application, I think legally it would be better if we worded it as a motion to approve the zoning variation because of the language in the state zoning code. So I apologize I didn't bring that up earlier, but if we could, I'd like to ask Trustee Zora to revise her motion to state that it's a motion to approve the variation.
You want me to do that right now? Okay. I would like to make a motion to approve zoning application number 2015-05, requesting a variation from section 12(4)C of the zoning code for 1618 Finsbury Lane.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion before we proceed? Trustee Rocco.
I just want to make sure that we're follow up here that regarding Trustee Lautner's barrier fence and paying all fines, if that is something that, if there was a motion put on the table for approving the variance subject to those conditions, not the condition about the neighbors, approval, agreement of neighbors, but the paying the fines and the barrier fence, is that something that?
You have to move to amend the motion that's just been made.
Right, before I do that, I'm just looking to fellow trustees to see if that's worth our time and trouble. If that changes your viewpoint, then it's worth our time and trouble. If it doesn't, then we'll save our energy.
I would move to amend the motion to considering the installation of a fence and paying all fines. I would move to amend the motion to include those 2 provisions.
The motion needs a second.
Second.
Okay, now discussion on the amendment. Trustee Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not so sure that I'm sold on the fence being the savior, because I would be concerned about where the fence is placed and what the American Gas Association, as far as how close it's going to be to the unit, well, it would affect makeup air for combustion or exhaust. I wouldn't want to muffle the sound every week that it tests for 20 minutes to a half hour toward the house or toward the neighbor to make it worse. But that would be my major concern. A, that the fence might increase the noise, and B, with the makeup air combustion, we might be asking for more trouble. And with 30 years in the business, that's why I bring that up.
Trustee Zora?
I completely agree with Trustee Messick. There definitely are manufacturer requirements for clearances, and if you don't meet them, that's very dangerous. So we don't know what the requirements are, and we don't know where the fence is going to fall. So there's too many unknowns for me to approve this.
Help me understand. To keep the generator where it's at and put a fence up to rectify the problem?
And
Yes.
pay the fines.
And
to
pay
the
all fines.
I don't see how that rectifies the problem.
I think it mitigates the noise concerns and supports the location of the generator today that I think does appear to be in the best location to reduce the amount of noise to the resident and neighbors.
So we're accepting the variance of where the generator is right now and trying to
That-
camouflage it.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be the motion to amend
The amended motion.
the original
Okay.
motion.
Mr.
Trustee
President?
Sheehan?
One more thing. Since we've switched this around, I would be more curious with an engineer, the village engineer, Mr. Flood, and Mr. Magus, the inspector, if you have more to add on this latest turn of events.
I think from a sound dampening process, I'm not sure that the fence would have any significant impact on it. Again, the acoustic side of this is not my particular expertise, but generally speaking, low frequency vibration kind of roll over a fence. And they do with sound walls and things, they tend to roll over them, they don't really deflect them.
How about my point about the combustion air or the makeup air? We don't know.
That I would defer to the manufacturer on that as far as the spacing they require. They do have, for the manufacturer specs, certain distances from all rigid and like houses, windows, fences, and I think as long as you follow their guidance, you'd be all right. I'm not sure if this particular size generator, what that would be.
And maybe I missed something, but is he willing to put the fence up to appease us? Because he seems to think the neighbors are okay.
No, he just wants a new fence.
I have a comment on the fence mitigating any sound, but I'll let.
Yeah, I just want to know, I mean, if the neighbors are okay with it, what is the purpose of the fence in his eyes, unless it's just to address the issue of the generator where it's at?
I did not speak specifically with the applicant about why he applied for the fence, but he applied for the fence before being minded that he needed to address the generator
Okay.
situation. So I don't think the
So
two
we're
have
not sure.
anything to do with each other. I think he decided he wanted to put in a new fence, and only when that application was denied did he then come forward with the application for the
Okay.
variation.
Julia?
Mr. President, I just want to make a note about the fence barrier to the unit itself mitigating any sound, because we went through this quite extensively for our own generator for the village hall. And that question was brought up by a number of residents. I asked the question to the engineer that was working on the project, whether or not the fence that would surround the unit would provide any sound mitigation or attenuation, and the answer was no. It was to screen the unit, and any mitigation would have to come from the sound enclosure of the unit itself, as well as any material that would be provided on the inside of the fence that would further mitigate or muffle the type of sound. Now, granted, it's a much different size generator. It's a much larger generator, but my understanding is that a fence doesn't mitigate the sound for the motor that comes from it.
Would it amplify it?
I don't know whether it would amplify it. I've never received any
Coming off
information
the
to
building.
suggest that it would amplify it. And I
Okay.
can tell you that any exhaust that comes from a unit is, it depends on the manufacturer of the
Okay.
unit. I think this is a Generac, but I don't know anything about a Generac.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
One more,
Trustee
Mr. President.
Lautner.
Thank you, Mr. President. In consideration of the information that's come forward here, there seems to me a lot of unknowns. The combustion issue is a safety issue. We don't know what the manufacturer's specs are. I guess I was under the assumption that the fence would provide some sound mitigation, more so than I thought, but not without additional padding or material that I know that we, as a village, are providing with the one that we're planning here. But then the question comes up, well, what kind of material would need to be provided to mitigate sound as well? I guess considering those, and it sounds like a little bit of a 180 here, but I guess that's what it is. I would like to respectfully retract my motion to amend the original motion, whatever legal approach we need to do that. So I'm retracting my motion to amend the original
You
motion.
want to withdraw the amendment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So we're back to the original motion.
Back to the original motion from my point of view.
Trustee Rocco.
No, I think I've spoke my piece.
Oh, okay. I thought you were coming up with.
No, I'm smiling.
Okay. Any other questions before we call the vote?
No, sir.
Okay, the vote that we're voting on is the motion to approve zoning application number 2015-05, requesting a variation from section 12.4.c of the zoning code for 1618 Finsbury Lane. Amanda, will you call the roll?
Trustee Messick?
No.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
No.
Trustee Zora?
No.
Trustee Lautner?
No.
Motion fails 4-1.
Okay, next on our agenda, public safety. Trustee Messick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will start with the monthly report for September of 2015 for the police. Total number of crimes reported continue to remain almost identical to last year. To date, all reported crimes against persons and property are at 174 compared to 171 in total through September of last year. Total police department service and assistant calls remain lower than last year at this time, with 4,973 reported through September as compared to 5,407 last year through September. Patrol officers on all shifts have been active in writing tickets for a variety of infractions. The comparable stats include the following: 4,976 to date through September of 2015 compared to 4,471 from last year through September of 2014, a positive difference of 505 total citations to date. Also, the police department will be starting its 15th year of Adopt a Cop program in affiliation with most schools in LaGrange Park. The program will kick off in October with the primary focus of Halloween safety for kids grades K through 8. Officers will be meeting once a month with their respected classes covering various topics. In addition, all LaGrange Park schools will be administering direct training in relation to soft, hard lockdown drills in association with the police department starting in October of this year. Now on to fire. Fire department activities for September of 2015. EMS responses for the month were 132. There have been 1,297 year-to-date compared to 1,176 year-to-date last year. Fire rescue incidents in the month of September, 48, where there have been 385 year-to-date compared to 389 last year. Underwriters Laboratories completed annual required testing of the ladder truck. They have also been completed biannual testing of all ground ladders. All ladder testing passed with the exception of one ground ladder which required a minor repair. Promotional testing and evaluations were completed for position of paid-on-call fire lieutenant. 7 applicants completed, and we swore in the lead one tonight. Personnel provides EMS standby for 3 Nazareth football games. The remainder of hydrant flushing and inspections were completed. And on September 6th, personnel participated and won the annual Big Softball Tournament in Hinsdale. That event is held in memory of Hinsdale Deputy Fire Chief Mark Johnson, who also served on our department and was a LaGrange Park resident. Congrats to them. And then now for a consolidated dispatch update or for discussion. The purpose is to provide the board with an update of progress of the new Consolidated Dispatch Center, the Lyons Township Area Communication Center, or LTAC, serving the villages of LaGrange Park, and Western Springs. Three participating communities have made progress in its work towards the LTAC Consolidated Center. Both the Operations Committee, comprised of the 6 chiefs, and the LTAC Executive Committee, made up of the 3 village managers, have met on a regular basis with LTAC Executive Director Kimberly Knutson in the research and planning of various elements of implementation. Below provides overviews. So, certification in July 2015, Governor Rauner signed PA 99-0006, which amended certain provisions of state law regarding telecommunications and 911 centers, among other things. Under this new law, by July of 2017, consolidation of existing public safety answering points must take place. More specifically, the statute provides that in a county with a population of at least 250,000, that any 911 authority serving a population of 20,000 or less must be consolidated into newer existing joint emergency telephone system. Therefore, while we are ahead of the game, we are now required to consolidate. The goal of the law is to implement a uniform statewide 911 system, except for the city of Chicago, that effective January 1st, 2016, will be administered by the Office of the 911 Administrator within the Department of the State Police. Thus, the administration of emergency telephone systems and distribution of wireless surcharge funds will no longer remain with the ICC, Illinois Commerce Commission, and a new statewide 911 advisory board must be created to assist with the transition to a statewide 911 system. While there is a new law in place, much of what to expect is unknown, and the rules for the new system have yet to be written. What we do know is that our application to certify our new center will not go to the ICC, but the state police, and that current funds we receive to fund the 911 operations will transition to the state and will then be paid out under a new formula or new rate to the new consolidated center. So while 3 villages are planning to transition to one consolidated center, the state environment in which we operate is also changing rapidly. The LTAC Operations Committee is currently working on its application to the state. We hope to be one of the first ones in the state and that the state will see under the new system. We anticipate because of the changes, ours may take longer to process, so it's imperative to get it submitted, and the IGA needs to be approved by each of the villages before we can submit our application. So the final draft of the intergovernmental agreement is nearly complete. So for the Western Springs attorney, Mike Jurasek, has crafted the documentation. Once in its final form, it will go to Attorney Keating for her review. And once it's all reviewed, several provisions have been updated to align with the new state 911 centers. So currently, the Emergency Telephone Systems Act and the Wireless Emergency Telephone Safety Act authorize the collection of certain surcharges to assist municipality in the delivery of 911 services. This act also allows for the establishment of an emergency telephone system board to receive the surcharges and authorize disbursements of the funds received. Under PA 99-0006, the Emergency Telephone Systems Act is amended such that 2 or more municipalities are allowed to establish a joint emergency telephone systems board, providing that local ETSBs are terminated by ordinances that rescind their establishment authority and operational functions. This is in order for LTAC to receive future surcharge funding. We must dissolve our individual ETSBs and file for a joint one when we submit our application. In reviewing the existing facility, it became clear the new dispatch center will be in a different room, so it was larger, more cost-effective, and this is because the existing location is not sufficient to house the necessary infrastructure for the new center. So we moved from the basement up to the records room. The Operations Committee and Kimberly Knutson have requested the approval to move forward with an RFP for architectural and engineering services and other space needs, to plan these space needs and establish current future capacity. There will also be on the agenda a CAD system update. The LTACC Operations Committee looked for 2 options for its computer automated dispatch system, New World and Valor. These 2 systems are among the best in the industry, and LaGrange currently utilizes Valor while Western Springs utilizes New World. We in LaGrange Park do not have one, so rather than purchase an entirely new system and build new, the Operations Committee chose to consider options which expanded from an existing system to be more cost-effective. In reviewing both systems, the Operations Committee has selected the New World for its performance as it is known in Western Springs and for future capabilities for the new center. LTAC is seeking authorization from each of the communities to move forward with its upgrade, as it will take several months to purchase, install, transfer data from the two communities, and train on the new system. And then there's just an attached memo on that. So there is no actual motion or anything. There is an update, and no action is requested at this time. Staff will prepare a cover memo, accompanying documents, and a presentation for the November work session for board discussion, question, answer, and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Messick. Village Manager Cedillo, did you want to add anything to the report that Trustee Messick?
No, I think that was a pretty good overview. We wanted to make sure that the village board understood what they could anticipate at the work session for next month, and we wanted to be able to provide a preview of that. So there's a lot of ground to cover next month, and each of the three villages is trying to work in concert with one another with this consolidated project. So we're trying to make sure our timing is in coordination.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Messick. Public Works Committee, Trustee Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following is a monthly report for Public Works activities for the month of September 2015. First, Public Works brush pickup took place the first full week in September. 93 hours were spent making several passes through town, removing approximately 145 yards of brush from the parkway. 24 hours were spent on wrapping new tree plantings with protective tubing. 7 hours were spent on tree trimming. 114 hours were spent on the maintenance of Public Works equipment and vehicles. 136 hours were spent filling potholes with 15 tons of UPM. 145 hours were spent on building and ground maintenance around the Village Hall, Public Works facility, and along 31st Street. The street sweeper cleaned over 146 miles of street during 126 hours and picked up 74 yards of debris. Barricades were delivered for 27 block parties during the month. Various work orders were completed with crews removing roadkill, tree trimming, individual brush pickups, parkway repairs, cleaning sewer catch basins, and making sign repairs. Various vehicles had repairs and preventative maintenance performed on them. And moving to water department operations, over 321 day shift hours and 40 time overtime man hours during the month of September were spent on maintenance and repairs of sewer and water mains. 36,050,000 gallons of water were purchased from the Brookfield North Riverside Water Commission. 1,337 water meters were read in Section 3. 52 monthly accounts and 29 final meter reads were taken. Various inspections, appointments, and service calls were performed. 15 water bacterial samples were taken and all samples passed. 213 utility locations were identified prior to excavation. 3 water mains were repaired, 4 Buffalo box repairs were made, and 2 fire hydrant modification kits were installed. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan. Moving on, Finance Committee, Trustee Rocco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a report and then an action item. As of September 30th, 2015, we have completed 5/12 or 42% of the fiscal year. Highlights: fiscal year to date, general fund revenue is at 50% of the annual budget and approximately $353,000 greater than last year. Property tax receipts are about $55,000 higher than last year at this time. Sales tax revenue is essentially flat from last year. Natural gas tax receipts have dropped about 51% from last year. Prior year receipts were higher due to extremely cold weather in 2014. In addition, gas prices have been lower than the prior year. Permit revenue jumped in July due to a single large permit and is about 40% above last year. Intergovernmental revenue is 19% greater than last year due to increased receipts from state shared revenues, including income tax, personal property replacement tax, and use tax. IDOR has reported that the increased income tax may be partially due to overwithholding by employers who did not adjust the sales tax rate from 5% to 3.75%. This would result in lower income tax receipts later in the year. Charges for services are about $50,000 greater than last year, primarily due to higher ambulance fees collections. Fine revenue is 17.5% higher than the prior year, due in part to the police department's use of the state's local debt recovery program to collect unpaid tickets. Miscellaneous revenue is about $53,000 higher than the prior year due to the collection of payments in the lieu of taxes due from prior years. Total general fund expenditures are within expectations at 37% of the annual budget and about $760,000 lower than last year. Last year's budget included a $1.2 million transfer to the Capital Projects Fund compared to $200,000 this year. Excluding the difference in the capital transfer, the total fiscal year-to-date expenditures are about $51,000 or 1.7% below last year. And then I have one action item, Mr. President. Regarding the 2015 property tax levy estimate. The purpose of this is to approve the estimate of the amount, to approve an estimate of the amount of property taxes to be levied by the village for the 2015 as required by the Truth in Taxation laws. The Truth in Taxation law requires that the village board estimate the amount of property taxes to be levied at least 20 days prior to the adoption of the annual tax levy. The village's 2015 tax levy ordinance will be reviewed at the November 10th workshop and then placed on the agenda for board approval at the November 24th meeting. The village's annual property tax levy is restricted by the Illinois Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, PTEL. The PTEL limits the amount the village may increase the aggregate levy each year to the lesser of 5% or the change in the Consumer Price Index. For the 2015 levy, the PTEL CPI change is 0.8% and is therefore the limiting factor. PTEL allows the village to collect additional taxes on any new property value. Over the last 10 years, the value of new property has ranged between 0.04% and 0.64% of the village's total equalized assessed value. Since we will not know the actual amount of new value until well after the village's tax levy ordinance is due to the county clerk, an estimate of 2% of EAV has been included in the levy estimate calculation. The county will reduce the village's extension to the amount allowed under the PTEL. It is important to note that while the estimated village levy is increased due to the new property value, the actual change for most homeowners will be closer to the 0.8% CPI. The levy estimate for 2015 is $3,500,132, which is 2.83% above the 2014 extension of $3,403,907. The estimated amount is less than a 5% increase, so a public hearing is not required under the Truth in Taxation law. Staff recommends the village board approve the property tax estimate at the October 27th meeting. I move that the president and village board of trustees estimate that the amount necessary to be raised from the 2015 property tax levy for the 2015-16 fiscal year is $3,500,132, which amount is less than 5% greater than the amount of taxes extended for 2014.
Second. Motion and a second. Trustee Rocco?
I think that the report is self-explanatory. We do this every year and makes sense.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Any other comments from the board? Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Zora?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you,
Okay.
Trustee Rocco.
Thank you, Mr. President. And that concludes my report and action items.
Okay, moving on, other reports. Village clerk,
Nothing to report, Mr. President.
our village treasurer.
One item to report tonight, Mr. President. I attended the Police Pension Fund quarterly meeting last night, and on your desk in front of you is a copy of the financial statements as of September 30, 2015. If you flip to the very back page, it gives you a overview of how the fund has done since the beginning of this fiscal year. At the top, you'll see the additions to the fund, which are the contributions from both the village and the employees, which come to about $416,957. Below that, you'll see that the fund's investments have had a change in market value of about $600,000 to the negative, as the market has had some poor returns, but that is not unusual for all funds at this point because of the condition of the market. And actually in October, some of that has been recouped as the market has returned higher. Below that, under deductions, you'll see that the fund has paid out about $482,000 in benefits this year, and all that equals that the fund has about $12.76 million left at the end of September 30. And that concludes the report.
Thank you, village treasurer.
You're very welcome.
Any comments from the board? Okay. Our village attorney?
I have nothing to report, Mr. President.
Okay, motion to approve committee and collectors' reports as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, I have a couple items. One is discussion action, appointment of the youth commission. The village currently has one vacancy on the youth commission due to one commissioner opting not to be reappointed. The village recently received an application from George Anaganis, who is interested in serving on the commission. Staff has discussed the role and responsibilities of serving on the commission with both Mr. Anaganis and his parents and feel that he is well-suited to join the commission. And I just want to read a couple things here on his application. Taking in mind, he is a sophomore at Lyons Township High School. He's on the theater board, LTTV, Science Olympiad, Aviation Club, Technology Club, Peer Tutoring, Social Action Club. He's information systems consultant, various clients with their technical needs. He's a camp counselor. He's honor roll every semester. Academic award for scoring high on the ACT. I don't know when he's going to find time to do all this. He's amazing. So great selection. Any comments from the board?
Thank you, Mr.
Trustee
President.
Lautner?
I do know the family, and I'm aware of George, and would have nothing but positive things to support and encourage his involvement.
Seems like quite a nice young man. Any other comments? Did I get a second? I did. So the motion is to appoint George Anagalis to the Village of LaGrange Park Youth Commission for a term to expire in May 1st, 2017.
Second.
Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Sarah? Sorry, Trustee Zora?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I have a couple other items. Julie and I had met and gave a presentation on the referendum to a couple areas. District 102 was last Thursday night. Tonight we went to the library board and informed them, gave them information about the referendum. November 12th is our town hall meeting here, open to the public. We hope to get a good turnout for that. And I have one exciting thing to mention. We're going to be nationally televised on Thursday night. And Julie Collard, if you're watching this, good luck. She's going to be on Jeopardy as a LaGrange Park resident. If you need any help with the answers, Julie,
Phone
we're
a
all
friend.
available. Good luck, Julie. We need money for our roads. Any other comments, any public participation? Any new business? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.